This is the City of Waupaca, first Tuesday of the month, City Council meeting.
To tonight's regular scheduled City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020, and I call this meeting to order. And let's begin, as always, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we need Sandy to read the open meeting statement for us.
This meeting and all other meetings of the Common Council are open to the public. Proper notice has been posted and given to the media in accordance with Wisconsin state statutes, so that citizens may be aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting.
And also take roll for us, Sandy.
Brian Smith.
Here.
Steve Hackett.
Here.
Lori Chestnut.
Here.
Paul Hagan.
Here.
Alan Keelan.
Here.
Scott Perchatsky. Dave Peterson.
Here.
Paul Mayo.
Here.
Dimitri Martin.
Here.
Mary Fair.
Here.
And Eric Olson. 8 present, we have a quorum.
All right. Next up, then, we have the consent agenda. Sandy, you have one item there.
Under number 5, consent agenda, letter C, approval of bills was uploaded to the city website.
All right, that's the only addition to the consent agenda. As always, council members, if you see something on the consent agenda that you would like to see moved to the regular agenda where you would deal with that on an individual basis, this is your time to make that request. Anybody? If not, we need a motion to approve.
Move. Second.
Motion by Hackett, second by Keelan, that we approve the consent agenda with that one addition. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Under the regular agenda, we do have a handout that was just handed out tonight on your desk, and you'll see that it's from the Great Neighbor Shout Out. That's the only thing that we have in addition to what we already have. So we would be looking for a motion to approve the regular agenda.
So move.
Second.
Motion from Chestnut, second by Hagan, that we approve the regular agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. All right, under non-agenda items and announcements, we have a presentation on the Great Neighbor Shout Out by Julie Philippek, Goodwill NCW Neighborhood Partners. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Appreciate having a few minutes to talk to you. So I lead the Neighborhood Partners program at Goodwill Industries in North Central Wisconsin out of Menasha, and have been working on neighborhood development in neighborhoods mostly in the Fox cities for the last 10 years or so. I'm joined by a number of members of the Social Connectedness Action Team here, which is an outgrowth from the most recent Theta Care chat plunge on social connectedness that happened in the spring, this past spring, where it was decided that people were interested in Waupaca in thinking about how people can become more connected to one another in their neighborhoods. So we're here to just announce to you and invite you to get involved with this initiative. The long-term vision, at least over the next few years, is to think about how neighbors can be more neighborly and how neighbors can really work together in their neighborhoods to make them the places they want to be, whatever that means to them. There'll probably be some focused work in one neighborhood that has not been identified yet, and opportunities for many residents of Waupaca, the city, and the greater area of townships to think about strengthening their neighborhoods. that whole thing is going to launch with this great neighbor shout out. And the concept is really very simple. Over the next couple months, starting in mid-March, people will have an opportunity to nominate someone in their neighborhood for anything they've seen that person do, any kind thing, any generous act, large or small, adults or children. And we will collect all these nominations and just give people an opportunity to recognize people for simple things. They're probably going to be mostly things that people would never think that they should be recognized for, just those really simple neighborly things. But we just don't often enough celebrate those things. So we will collect all these nominations, and then in June, a date that has not been yet identified, we will gather everyone who was nominated and everyone who nominated someone for a dinner and a celebration and a sort of viewing and sharing of what all those kind gestures were, and also use that event as an opportunity to talk about neighborhoods and give a chance for people to talk about their neighborhood and what their neighborhoods mean to them. So we're bringing it to you because all of you certainly are embedded in your neighborhoods and in your districts, and all of us would love any chance to talk with you about how you think we might communicate about this with people in your district. We will have ballot boxes out in various locations in the community. There will be an online portal where people can do nominations right into a website. There will be some postcards that get mailed out to everyone in the community. So there will be those communication channels. But I think that the word of mouth and the one-to-one conversation and any kind of communication you have with people in your district would be really helpful. Is there anything y'all feel I should add to that? So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to make?
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, actually, I had the opportunity to meet with Patsy, and she explained this to me too, and I really thought it was a neat concept. And she said, the first thing you need to really think about is in your neighborhood, is there one person that is really deserving of this? And it didn't take me more than a minute to figure out in my neighborhood who that would be, and that's probably true with most of us in the community. I do want to thank you for coming to Waupaca and reaching out, because I think it's a really neat thing to be doing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on then. We have public input. This is for non-agenda items. If there's anybody in the audience or council or staff that would like to speak to us on a non-agenda item, please step up to the podium, give your name and address for the record, and limit your discussion to 3 minutes or less. All right, let's move on then to unfinished business. We have ordinance number 01-2020. This is the ordinance amending the City of Waupaca year 2030 comprehensive plan. Justin, again, just real quick.
Yep, this is the second reading, so this would go or be approved tonight at the council level. This is for the former Habercorn Field location that part of our 30-year comp plan is currently zoned as recreation, but this is the first step to get it rezoned to allow the future public works facility and rezone to public utilities or facility zoning class. So this is just for the comp plan. The next item is for the rezone.
Okay. So I asked earlier, but Sandy or Aaron, you didn't hear anything on this being the second reading?
No, nothing.
Okay, so we're ready. If you're okay, we would like to move forward with approving this ordinance. Anybody?
Move to approve.
Don't make Dave do it.
Second.
Motion by Keelan, second by Fair, that We approve ordinance number 01-2020. This is an ordinance to amend the City of Waupaca year 2030 comprehensive plan. And this is the second reading. Any discussion? Sandy will call the roll.
Steve Hackett.
Aye.
Lori Chestnut.
Aye.
Paul Hagan.
Aye.
Alan Keeland.
Aye.
Dave Peterson.
Aye.
Paul Mayo.
Aye.
Dimitri Martin.
Aye.
Mary Fair.
Aye.
8 ayes, motion carried.
All right, and the rezone ordinance.
The rezone, so now that we got the comp plan adjusted, now we can officially rezone it, which would go from recreation to the PUL, which is public facility, utility lands. The actual ordinance is on page 22. The zoning, if you're interested in the wording of that, is on sheet 20 or page 20. And then the survey that goes along with the legal description and the certified survey map is on page 16, which shows a draft survey, but it's just draft right now. When this is approved, we'll put the final draft together for this adoption of the rezone. And again, second reading.
All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve this rezoning ordinance.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Fair, second by Chestnut, that council rezones City of Waupaca, Michigan Street and Harding Street, ordinance number 02-2020. And this is an ordinance amending section 17.201, parent 2 of chapter 17 of the municipal code of the City of Waupaca entitled Amendments to District Maps. Discussion? Sandy will call the roll.
Mary Fair.
Aye.
Dimitri Martin.
Aye.
Paul Mayo.
Aye.
Dave Peterson.
Aye.
Alan Keeland.
Aye.
Paul Hagan.
Aye.
Lori Chestnut.
Aye.
And Steve Hackett.
Aye.
8 ayes, motion carried.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a first reading of an ordinance, and I'll let Andrew explain it to you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So this is the first reading, as the mayor stated, for a mobile food unit ordinance, possible ordinance. You can find this starting on page 24 in the packet. This ordinance was worked on by myself, but also included many other departments, the city clerk, the code enforcement officer, the deputy clerk, the police chief. We also had fire department input on this as well as we move forward. So I'll just summarize it. There will be one recommended change as I move through it, and I will address that when we get to that. So the first is a couple sections are just the definitions and exemptions of what a mobile food unit would be and what is considered a mobile food unit. Underneath the third spot, you have the enforcement, and you kind of see some of the same names that I just read off as far as the city clerk for the application, the fire department for the fire inspection, code enforcement officer, and then the City of Waupaca Police Department as well, to make sure that rules are being followed throughout from the rest of the ordinance. We get into some of the restrictions as far as location restrictions that we thought were needed or necessary. The first one is that I want to point out in that section is in the second paragraph. If they are on the streets, all traffic and parking regulations shall be observed, and no unit shall impede the free use of such streets. So if they're going to be on the streets, they can't park in 2-hour parking for 4 hours. They can't, be blocking off streets and roads and such things like that. Going down to the third one, you get more into the public use of the parks. And being able to sell in parks. Now, I did bring this up to our park board and ask for suggestions and thoughts as we move forward on that. We ended up deciding as a group that they can be in the parks if authorized by me, so that I know who's in our parks, what's going on in our parks, and me as the Park and Recreation Director, not just me personally, so it's labeled as Park and Recreation Director. There's also a stipulation as 500 feet from any public park where there's a present holder of a rental agreement So if there's a fundraiser, they can't be impeding on the fundraiser in our parks. And then they also have to stay away from where the city operates a concession stand and is trying to operate that concession stand, or you know, a fundraiser on the weekend for boys baseball or girls youth softball. They can't be trying to take away from that as well. Then we get into some prohibited and required acts of the vendors as they move forward. I'll point out a few of the bigger ones. The first one is just that they do have to apply for a license and get said license from the city clerk. There's a lot of stipulations with that, which we'll get into in a little bit. They do have to display that license at all times in their mobile vending units so that we know that they are licensed and have that certificate. That's number 4. Number 6, they do have to contact the fire department and set up a time to be inspected by one of the inspectors through the fire department to make sure that they are adequately have their fire extinguishers or hood units or different things that they need to have so that we can make sure that we're keeping the public safe in that aspect as well. There are some vendor shall nots. One of them, trying to point out ones of interest, and please let me know if you have questions as we go through this. Number 2, they're not allowed to set up a bunch of tables and chairs and blocking off sidewalks to set up like a place to eat or to hang out. Number 9 is a big one, selling within 150 feet of a licensed restaurant during its kitchen hours without written permission from the merchant. So if they are on private property and invited to be there, i.e., let's say Little Caesars invites someone to be in their parking lot, that is okay. Otherwise, they have to stay 150 feet away from any licensed restaurant in the community. They also can't just sit in one spot for more than 5 hours unless they're in a park and it's granted, or they're on private property, or part of, you know, in a park, part of a fundraiser, Fall-A-Rama or something like that. So getting down to the application process, there's a bunch of different things that they will have to provide on that application. Many of these are the same as the food truck rally last year, as far as like a seller's license, health license. They'll have to have now background checks, which they had to. The fire department inspection is something new as the fire department learns what things we need to be taken care of. And so all those things will have to be up to code and on that application or handed in for them to receive that license. At the time of the application, and this is where one of the changes, recommended changes will come. At the time of the application, a non-refundable fee in the amount of $100 will be requested, and we'll add plus the $12 for the background check and plus $25 for the fire department inspection. The fire department has requested, as of last night, that they would like to add the $25 fee with the money going to the fire department to pay for the cost of the inspection. So it's like the plus $12 for the background check, it would be plus $25 for the fire department for the cost of the inspection, because they inspectors do get paid for those inspections that we do. The $100 would be waived for one-time nonprofit events. So there are some, quite a few events in the community that bring in food trucks, Arts on the Square, those types of places, and we don't want that to be a burden on those fundraisers and those big community events. So that fee would be waived for nonprofit events, but they would still have to pay for the background check so we know who is in our community and selling, and the fire department would still have to inspect that. So those fees would still apply. So we're trying to work with those community groups. And the license is January 1 to December 31. So it is the calendar year. Other than that, the authority for a license, I'm looking at number 11 here, license may be revoked by police department if they don't pass the background check, code enforcement officer, fire department if they don't pass the inspection, and of course they have to make sure they have all their licenses and ducks in a row for the application for the city clerk as well. So those are some of the high points. Definitely any of us who worked on it can answer any questions for you. I know there's a lot in there. So I will open that up for questions.
Mary, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question. So for Arts on the Square, the food vendors that come in their food truck, they have to get a city license? They have to get a background check, and the fire department has to check their food trucks?
So they would have to still go show the things on the application that are needed. So a seller's license, which they should have these if they're
Right,
legitimate
they
food
have
trucks.
their state seller's license,
Yep.
but they have to get a city license also?
They have to go through the application process to get the certificate, but we
Okay.
won't charge the $100 to
Okay,
them.
all
They
right.
just have to pay the $12 for the background check,
Okay.
$20 for out of state, right?
And when
then
would the fire department do an inspection? Would they come Saturday morning at 5 a.m. to, or would the people have to come here on another time just to have their truck inspected? How would that work?
I guess I don't know when they're coming into town or how they're working that, but we'll have to work, something
I
will
mean,
have to be
typically-
worked out, yes.
The vendors come in the day of the festival.
So tell me
So it
again, Arts on
starts
the
at
Square is
9,
on Saturday? They
right,
come in on Saturday?
Right, so they come in at 6 or 7 in the morning and get set up.
We would have to find, I mean, there's 10 plus inspectors, so we would have to find someone that is available. Now, there is, on the application, we do have it that they are supposed to give us 15 days to be able to get through all this stuff. So I will have to work and reach out with the community events that do bring it in and make sure that we understand how this is gonna go and
Okay.
how we can make it
And I
work.
can personally talk to you more about that, but, okay, thank you.
Do
Paul,
they have
go
to,
ahead. I'm sorry. I was looking over here. Paul Hagan.
under number 4, the last paragraph, it says, "No person shall operate an outdoor food stand within 500 feet of a public park where a present holder of a rental agreement is approved." Does that include pretty much every weekend where people have their graduation parties and their, private other parties versus big events?
Yep, so anytime that park is rented, through our park shelter rental, then they would not be allowed to be in there. And that's part of the reason to have them work with me to be authorized to be in there at certain times so that we can communicate with them that, hey, there's a wedding in our park or a graduation party. They have a rental agreement, they have food. Unless that graduation party, that's part of the graduation party. Does that make sense? Like they invited that food truck to be there?
Yeah, it just seems a little bit much that with pretty much every weekend that our parks are rented in the summer, and that's such that they wouldn't be able to be within 500 feet of that private party, which is really kind of a self-contained item, that why would, just because someone's having a graduation party where they wouldn't even really be interested in purchasing food, that just because that's there, that they wouldn't be able to be within 500 feet of it versus like you said, a softball tournament or something like that.
Sure. That's a great question.
And Paul, it might depend on the park that we're talking about too, quite honestly. I mean, if you're talking South Park and somebody's renting the lower shelter, I mean, would they still be able to allow a food truck on the upper shelter? I mean, those are questions that you might think of. Whereas if you're at Riverside Park, which is over on Royalton Street, you probably would want to limit it and not allow it if you have a private event there, because they would be the only ones there. So it depends on the park, I think, really.
And I would say, I would say the distances are probably what we talked about the most in our meetings, and kind of went back and forth on. So I think our thought there and anybody else from the group can speak up, was just to, protect those events and make sure that, there's not a bunch of people coming into the park trying to eat all the food that they're getting at the food trucks underneath the shelter when the shelter is supposed to be rented, and just, we're just trying to be respectful of those rental agreements who are paying for that space. But I get what you're saying as well. I mean, it definitely makes sense. So I don't know how others feel about that.
Okay, Dimitri was next, sorry.
Yeah, so, and this might be related, would that 500 feet restriction impact the ability of the food trucks to be present during the 4 music events that we hold each summer at South Park? Seems like there'd be a good synergy.
Yep.
Bring them down and.
So I think, and I don't know if it's worded correctly, but to me, that would be like someone who's on private property. They've been invited to be there. So if a graduation party invited a food truck to be there, or you guys invited a food truck to be there, I don't think there would be any issues with that at all, because they are part of that event that is renting the park. So if someone, if a food truck came to me and said, hey, we're going to be at the music in the park, I would say absolutely, because I know you guys, I would communicate with you guys that, yes, that's part of it, and they would be allowed to be there.
But what it would prevent would be just some other food truck deciding, hey, there's going to be a lot of people there, I'm going to go down and park my truck there. And if they weren't one of the invited food trucks, then they can't be there. That's how that would protect.
That's correct.
Protect the event.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
500 feet, too, as pointed out, is 160 yards. So I know it's kind of hard to judge 150 feet, and the other one is, how many yards would that be? I'm terrible at math. That's like a basketball court and a half, essentially it is.
Tom, you were going to say something?
I was just going to point out that exemption is 2 sub 7, and I would think those events in South Park would qualify as a festival, and they could be present with permission from the festival organizers.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Lori, you had a question?
So when there's not an event at like South Park, more than one food truck can be up there?
Yep. They just have to be authorized by the Park and Recreation Director, so that I know that they're in there. Yep.
Mayor.
Yeah, Paul.
So Andrew, why the difference between events in a park and the 500 feet for events in a park and 150 feet for restaurants? 150 feet is 50 yards. So
50 yards.
a food truck could basically set up across the street from a restaurant and be okay.
Again, the distance was one of the things we talked about most. I think if you think what we thought about as far as looking at the downtown area and some of the areas where we have restaurants, that 150 feet really does take quite a bit away, and hopefully keeps, what's that?
Not much. 50 yards isn't very far.
Okay.
I do know that, and Paul, and I know we're having a lot of questions based off this, and I was in one of the meetings, and not all of them, but I know that the group did kind of take a hodgepodge, if you will, of a lot of different ordinances in La Crosse and some other areas, and some of these might be pulled from some of those, just examples of how far were they from parks, how far were they from businesses. It doesn't mean we have to have that same. It might not fit our community perfect. As they said, that was something they debated a lot. So I think these are good questions to bring up. And once we go through that second reading, we want to make sure we feel comfortable with what's right. And, I don't think anyone else that was on that group here would probably disagree with that, but please feel free to let me know if you do.
Well, the reason I ask is a $100 fee for a year for a food truck versus a restaurant like mine that pays $15,000 in property tax. That's not a level playing field at all. And if somebody for $100 can set up 50 yards from an existing restaurant, that's not fair for $100.
So I am curious, Paul, what do you feel like is do you have a suggestion for, as a business owner?
Well, make it the same as parks, 500 feet.
So just keep it consistent.
Yeah.
Now, I do know some of that conversation was based off of, there's a business here, there's a business there, and now all of a sudden, do we have this huge swath of area that we can't go anywhere? And I don't know if that's been mapped out, but that'd be something to take into consideration.
Well, you still have the ability, though, if you were to do 500 feet or 150 feet, you still have the ability, if that business was okay with you
Right.
being within
Very-
that
very true.
distance, it would be okay,
Correct.
right? I mean,
If the business they're on or the business that is across the street is
well,
okay with
I
it?
mean, anyone that would be within whatever distance we decide to pick, you would have that ability.
So I guess my question there is who goes around and asks all the businesses if they're
Well, you have
okay
it in
with
there that the vendor has to ask. Doesn't it say it in there? I think.
If they're on private property, like on, say, let's just use Dairy Queen, if they were invited to be on the Dairy Queen property, but if they're on the Dairy Queen property but still not within 500 feet of any business, wouldn't that keep them from being there? Am I on the right path here of what you're asking? Or are we on a different?
If you're, let's say let's use Paul's as example, if you're down at Riverview Park, by where the walkway comes down, that's within 500 feet. Okay, so if T-Dubs doesn't have an issue with them being there, they could say it's okay, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. I mean, it might complicate things, but it would also, have to be a little bit careful, and I always preface this by saying that I'm maybe for not much longer, but I'm a restaurant and a bar owner too, so I gotta be a little careful when I talk about these things. But, I mean, I think we have to be cognizant of exactly what Paul said. I mean, we've made a huge investment in our community, and to charge somebody $125 to come into town and compete with us is a little scary, to tell you the truth. I mean, I get it if you're doing it in the parks, but if you're gonna set somebody down on City Square and sell fish fries on Friday night, then it affects the downtown businesses, and it affects all businesses, because it's just that much more competition.
And I think we went with 150 because we considered that to pretty much take away all of Main Street, all of downtown, to protect the downtown businesses. That was part of our thinking process. So there may be some situations where it's not completely covered, but if you think about the City Square, Main Street, up Fulton Street, there's really nowhere they're going to be able to go with the 150 feet. And that's really what our thought process was. Now, I understand completely what, Paul and you are saying. And so if it needs to change a little bit or there's a recommendation for change, then I guess that's a decision to be made by you guys.
My main point is why 500 feet for one and 150 for the other?
I think Aaron hit it on the head a little bit better. We're just trying to kind of piece it together in the beginning. I think the parks are larger, and that's why the larger number. So if you think about Swan Park, we have our stuff, or South Park, you need that extra distance to keep them out of that area, where we felt 150 pretty much gets rid of all of Main Street and the main corridor, business corridors that are there. So that was our thought process, whether right or wrong at this point.
So, and if I can just interject just for a second, what I'm hearing a little bit of, and I know Paul mentioned that maybe 500 feet was too much for a park. Paul over here mentioned that maybe 150 feet wasn't enough for a business. I mean, and I'm asking, I guess, the group that more worked on this more diligently, but for like a 250 for both or something, is that something that there'd be problems with? Would we restrict it too much at that point? had that come off just to be consistent too and not make it confusing? I mean, is it something that we could consider, bring back for the second reading or?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, if that's the direction that, the thought is going, I mean, we could definitely consider that and work that into it.
I would also suggest that might want to add some language in that the existing restaurant would have to be open, so that.
That, it does say during kitchen hours
Okay.
without written permission from that merchant, so.
Okay.
So, yeah, it'd be during kitchen hours. So say, I'm not sure when, going back to your example, T-Dubs opens at 6 or 4 or whatever it is. They could be in there during the day, just not when the kitchen is open during that time. So there's still there's some stipulations like that as well.
Alan, you wanted to say?
Yeah, if this goes back for a rewrite, when it comes back to council again, is it a first reading again?
Well, I was going to ask Tom Hart to clarify, because we haven't had this in a while. We already have the change with the request for the $25 fee increase for the fire department. So, Tom, maybe you could just
I'd say
address
start over.
What's that?
Have a new first reading.
Have a
with
new
these
first
changes.
reading? Does that, will that create any issues as far as I mean, I wouldn't think if we did the second reading, the first meeting in April, we'd still be okay.
Yeah.
wouldn't we?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll just do a new first reading?
Yes.
I guess we need to know what the consensus is, though, too. Was it, Paul? You had your hand up, I'm sorry.
I just had a different question.
Yeah,
So
go
if you-
ahead.
So, in situations where you are granting permission for a truck to be either in a park or, is that going to be per time they are there, or are you going to grant that for a specific period of time or the whole year?
It would be, I would work with them to see if there's going to be like a set times that they're going to be coming. But I wouldn't just say yes for the whole year, because I need to know, like we talked about with is there a rental or is there a wedding in there or something like that. So I think I have a pretty good grasp of most of the food trucks that will be in the area and have communicated with them in the past. And so I would think it would be a little bit shorter of a term than a year or something like that.
And just as a follow-up, if there's some dispute as to whether a truck should be there or not, is there a place where it can be, this is written down, or someone, or the police can refer to, or some place where it can be verified that you've given permission at a particular date and time?
That would be a great idea. I'm not sure. We haven't really considered that or talked about that, but that's a very good idea. So that, yeah, there's some sort of verification as far as who should be where. And like I said, there's only probably a handful of them that I've worked with them, and I think they would be the main ones. And so I have a pretty good communication with them, and I think we could definitely work it out. But I think there should be some sort of, this food truck's going to be in here this weekend, or
Even if it's a calendar where you write down where,
yeah.
whatever, it's just that I could foresee not having proper information out there if a food truck has permission to be in one spot versus another on a particular date.
Yep.
Okay, so let's since we're going to do another first reading, let's get a consensus. Are we okay with the additional $25 that because the fire department, the $25 for the fire inspection, I guess, is all I'm saying. Does anybody have any issues with that?
Well, I have a question. Is that like an annual fee, or is it per sitting that they have to have a whole new inspection every time?
It'd be annually as part of the application process, and it would be each year, just like we have to inspect
Okay.
Dairy Queen each year, or any of the other businesses each year. We go around each year and inspect them and make sure that they're up to code. So I feel like they should be held to the same standard.
Sure.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if a food truck has like with their state license, if they have documentation that they've had an inspection for fire safety from someplace else, would it be, would we waive that need for an inspection then? And I
Are you
don't have
talking
any
at like the
idea.
state level, or if they went
Right.
to like
Right.
the
I mean,
state?
if they
The
basically
state
say are
level
from
won't.
Appleton and they have, Appleton did a,
Yeah.
police department did an inspection, gave them a certification that they're practicing safely,
I-
would we,
Yeah, I understand. I don't think they do it at the state level, but if Appleton did it, I would still, unfortunately, have to say no, because we legally should be inspecting them when they come into our community
Okay.
as a business. So we want to make sure that, not to say that people do this, but just like a business, we could leave and they could change a bunch of stuff that isn't legal
Right.
the next day, and we wouldn't know until the next year. Same with the food trucks. And the food trucks are pretty used to it because they do go to so many communities and they are regulated in such different communities. I think a lot of them will understand most of this because they're used to this type of stuff in the different communities. So we want to make sure that they're keeping our community safe.
I would suggest a change then, under that investigation section, it directs that the police department conducts an investigation, but it only says that the fire department should report on a pass or failed inspection. And I think that's ambiguous, such that it doesn't say they're the ones that have to do the inspection.
Okay.
Everybody's okay, though, with the $25? Okay, how about the feet or the yards? Is it easier to do it by feet since you have a time dividing by 3?
I am a park and rec guy, not a math guy. Not a math major.
So, I mean, there was the 500 for one and the 150 for the other, and Aaron had made the suggestion that you just make it uniform and make it 250? Or do you want to leave it the same? I guess I'm not trying to force you to do anything here, or if you want to think about it, but again, then I think we'd have another first reading if we don't have a plan and we change it next time too again.
I have another question.
Well, we are talking about this though, right now.
Okay.
If you're talking about the distance,
Oh, I'm
go
not.
ahead, but
No,
I'll
I'm
let you ask the question after I get done with this. Are we okay with the way it's written right now? Okay, so how about, like I said, Aaron made the recommendation 250.
I like that.
Make it 100 yards.
100 yards?
Yeah.
300 feet.
Okay.
For both?
We have 300 feet for the school grounds, so we could be uniform.
How's that sound? Yeah?
That sounds good.
Alan, you okay? Yeah?
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm just harking back to the $100 thing. What are we going to use the $100 for? Shouldn't that cover some of the inspection fees?
So that's a good question, Alan. I guess the way I look at that is another thing that was compared with some other ordinances and other fees in other cities. And Mayor Smith mentioned, businesses that pay taxes, so on and so forth, year in and year out. I almost look at that fee as, maybe I should or shouldn't say this, but almost like a pilot fee, like a nonprofit would pay something to come into the city because they're not paying taxes. Not necessarily that we have to do something with it, but just for that reason, I guess.
Well, and it's also for the clerk's office, for our work.
I understand you have work to do. Yeah,
And
I
then
appreciate
Chief does
that.
his background. I mean, everybody's kind of got their fingers in it, so.
Okay.
Mary, you wanted to?
So my question was about the criminal background check. Same question. If a criminal background check is done on every employee that's in that food truck, and then it's done when they go to New London next week, and they go to some other place the next week, and they go up.
I'm not sure what other communities are doing,
But
honestly.
would that be the expectation? We don't care if you had one last week for a different city, you're going to have one here?
Well, it's very possible that, not that I'm saying that this has happened, that somebody could have committed a crime a month and a half earlier.
Certainly.
That's why we do them, and we do them just before the events happen.
Okay.
It would be impossible for us to be able to track from if they were in New London or if they were in Madison or in Appleton. So that's why we do them.
Okay.
So a follow-up to Mary's question. If you have vendors coming in the day of the event, they're going to have these criminal background checks done well ahead of that event?
There'll have to be some communication with the city beforehand, and that's kind of what the 15 days is for. So whether it's online or through email with the city clerk, they'll have to get that application, get the information back that we need, and then, as far as the fire inspection goes, that's a little bit different. But I think most of the other stuff could be done beforehand with them out, without them being in the community.
Yeah, as long as we had the information.
Yeah.
Right, the application was.
So I think it's definitely doable. I think that's where the communication on my part to these events that I know are bringing them in, so that we're all prepared this summer to work through this together and make sure that, the food trucks, if they know who's coming, we can get them a couple weeks ahead of time and get their information and get all that squared away. So communication will be very important on this one in the start.
Okay, anything else that you saw in there for now? I mean, keep your ears open, obviously, if you hear from the public, they're listening tonight and they have some other suggestions or ideas. And Andrew, I'm guessing that you're gonna try and reach out to a couple of the groups, the arts group and Strawberry Fest, or have they already been involved?
Not much yet. I was going to wait until it got passed so we knew exactly what the rules and stipulations were. But I can start to reach out to them and make sure they're aware of kind of what's coming and what's going on. And
Sure.
I will, like I said, I think we just need to work together this first summer as we move towards, all the different groups that are bringing in food trucks and make sure that we have it available to get all this stuff done in a timely fashion before they get here.
Okay. Anybody else? So, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
You talked about the first reading being in April.
No, the first reading would be the
March 7th.
March 7th.
March 17th, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard you say in April.
Well, if I said first, I meant second.
Okay.
All right, so this is the zero reading of the night here. Okay. Anybody, anything else on that, Andrew?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Unless anybody
let's-
else has questions.
All right, let's move on to the shingles on the Swan Park concession stand then.
Save the hard one for the second.
Great.
Let's see. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Again, I think we're on page 29, if I remember, for this one. So this is part of capital improvement project that we're working on at Swan Park. If you remember, during the capital budget, $65,000 was put for replacing the roofing and siding on all the buildings at Swan Park. Most of this work is and has been done by our Parks and Cemetery crew person and our park superintendent. They're actually making great progress because of the really nice weather we've had lately. But the one thing they are not able to do is the concession stand shingles because of the size and the amount of work that it would take for them to do. So as part of that, we sent out and requested bids for coming in and doing the shingles on the concession stand at Swan Park. We did get 3 quotes that you can see there. Those are attached after the memo. One from K&E Builders, one from Zarnke Roofing LLC, and one from ARC Contracting of Wisconsin Incorporated. We did look through the quotes, all 3 of the quotes, and made sure that they were equal as far as what we were getting for those shingles and the different, other extras that we have as well, and they are very comparable. So based on those prices and being comfortable with K&E Builders, we would recommend moving forward with K&E Builders to remove and replace the shingles on the concession stand. They were the lowest quote. Our park superintendent feels very comfortable working with them and making sure that it gets done. Again, with this nice weather coming up, it may be sooner than later. With that price, I would like to add 10% contingency to the quote, just based on the fluctuation of prices of materials, and in case we find any issues underneath the shingles when they do rip them off, we want to make sure that we're prepared for that in case there's some rotten boards or some water damage or something like that. So requesting tonight that the Common Council approve moving forward with K&E Builders to remove and replace the shingles on the Swamp Park concession stand for the price not to exceed $15,000.
Okay, that's recommended. I'm sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
Just looking at the K&E quote, obviously, they have a difference for their total, because when I add up the two items, it shows that it should be $14,060, not $13,910.
Thank you, Kat.
Well,
Is it because he's estimating the tear off, or?
well, we're still within the 15,000 though, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not sure if that's just a math mistake or if it's, I guess I can't speak for that. But we are still within that $15,000. And I think we'd still be comfortable with that.
I would have you clarify with K&E before you accept and sign off on this, what the total price is.
So what did it add up to be, Kathy?
$14,060. So he must be giving you a discount.
14,006. So it's not that far off.
Well,
$70.
$70.
I mean, again, he's quoting $13,910 for his total. So we don't know that he didn't make a mistake in his labor or his materials either. But we do know that we're putting in a contingency of approximately 10% into this, and that will more than cover the $70 difference. And it sounds like they'd like to do this project early if they could. So I appreciate Kathy's comments, but I think, Andrew, you could just verify it with him, but I think we're still okay with approving up to $15,000 and getting this thing moving.
Yes.
Anybody'd like to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Keelan, second by Chestnut, that we approve of hiring K&E Builders Incorporated to remove and replace the shingles on the Swan Park concession stand for a price not to exceed $15,000. Any discussion? Sandy will call the roll.
Lori Chestnut.
Aye.
Alan Keeland.
Aye. Aye.
Paul Mayo.
Aye.
Dimitri Martin.
Aye.
Dave Peterson.
Aye.
Mary Fair.
Aye.
Steve Hackett.
Aye.
And Paul Hagan.
Aye.
8 ayes, motion carried.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the fuel farm. Kathy.
Thank you, Mayor. My report is on page 37 of the packet, and this is for the purchase of the Waupaca Airport fuel system upgrade. The current system will no longer be able to be fixed as of June. We were notified last year to update it to the newer version that allows for credit card security and chip reading. It's just to update our older card reading system. So we had Beth go out, the airport manager, go out for quotes to replace the system. And we received 3 of them. Some of them didn't have the electrical or the installation total in their quotes. But Metco Fuel Systems for complete install was $17,225. In the 2020 budget, we did budget $15,000 because we kind of were a little bit low on the installation costs and the electrical. But we also have $5,000 budgeted for the city's share of the design on runway 1331 that is not going forward with the Bureau of Aeronautics capital plan for next year. So between the 15,000 and the 5,000, we'll have more than enough to cover the Metco fuel systems in the 2020 bond issue. So answer any questions regarding the system.
Okay, any questions? If not, Kathy's asking us to approve purchasing this from Metco Fuel Systems.
Make a motion to approve Metco Fuel Systems for an amount not to exceed $17,225 for electrical and installation.
Second.
Motion by Hagan, second by Hackett. Discussion? Sandy O'Colero?
Alan Keeland.
Aye.
Dave Peterson.
Aye.
Eric Olson. Oops. Mary Fair.
Aye.
Dimitri Martin.
Aye.
Paul Hagan.
Aye.
Lori Chestnut.
Aye.
Steve Hackett. Paul Mayo.
Aye.
And eight ayes, motion carried.
Thank you, Kathy. Next up, we have Covered Bridge Lift Station backup generator. Justin.
Thank you, Mayor. My memo can be seen on page 48 and 49 of the packet with supporting materials or documents behind that. Basically, our sewer group operates 12 lift stations throughout the city, which gets all of our sewage or helps get it all to the treatment plant. 4 of those stations have a fixed backup generator, which automatically turn on when the lift stations lose power. The rest do not. They either have a transfer switch or a bypass pumping, which requires our staff to either take a portable generator there or a portable pump to service it. When there's been power outages, if there's multiple lift stations out of power, they just have to leapfrog around and have been, up to this point, we've been able to keep up. Some of the more recent storms we've had, or severe storms, I should say, have knocked the entire city out of power. The one in July, some parts of the city were out for close to a week, and that included our lift stations, and we had quite a tough time keeping up with all of them. So with that, we decided, hey, we need to prioritize some of our lift stations and look into more backup power. The first and obvious choice for us was what we call the Covered Bridge lift station. It's located right next to Burger King and services everything west of that. So that includes 2 hotels, about 6 or 7 apartment complexes, a residential area, as well as a business district over there. So it's one of our more busy lift stations. So it's an obvious choice, and we do not have a fixed generator there. So we budgeted $25,000 for this project. Jesse Landry, our wastewater superintendent, gathered 3 quotes, which are shown. There's an analysis spreadsheet which breaks it all down on sheet 50. So we got the 3 quotes, and we reviewed them. With the review, we asked them to submit basically their specifications, what they would anticipate what would be needed to keep up with our demand. So we have 2 pumps down there at 7.5 horsepower. We told them, well, make that 10 because we have the potential to upgrade with more development happening out in that west end. And this is what we got. When we reviewed it, we had the most comfort with the Kohler backup generator, which has a 101 horsepower engine connected to it to power this 40 kilowatt. Basically, it's a heavy duty alternator which just produces electricity. So the other ones, we received the other 2. Basically, we've had some concerns with the other ones, just wouldn't quite keep up in the most severe cases. And with the Kohler generator being the middle run, it's not the lowest at the baseline price, we still feel that it's our best bet. Our other 4 backup generators are all Kohler, so our staff has familiarity working with those generators in those service technicians. And we think it's our best bang for our buck as far as the cost goes. Since we were under budget, we looked at some add-ons, which are listed in the memo. The first one is an overflow bottle for coolant system. This would basically be if the engine overheated and the radiator started to boil over, there's an additional piece of equipment on there which basically prevents it from just spilling out and wasting. If this engine has to run full speed for a long time, it's a possibility. We also want to add on a 5-year comprehensive warranty. This covers parts, materials, mileage, and drive time for a technician. Now, recently we had to call out a technician for the backup generator PD for a guy to come here for 3 hours with $1,000. So we think that this extra warranty for $800 is well worth the price. Our guys are pretty savvy, but sometimes there's things that they just can't do. Well, I should have mentioned at the beginning, this generator is going to run on natural gas. So with adding that component, that's just something that we usually don't mess around with and call on somebody else to properly handle it. And then finally, the last add-on was to upgrade the automatic transfer switch. Basically, it's just kind of a more robust piece of equipment. When there's a power failure, it automatically switches on the backup power. In consultation with Bauer Electric, they recommended this. It's just a heavier duty piece of equipment to be added onto it, and something they said you won't want to mess around with if this is that important of a piece of equipment. So when we add all those things up, I'm looking to get a request for Total Energy Systems, which is the rep for this Kohler backup generator, for $23,415. We did look into the add-ons for the Cummings, which was the low for the base. We did the add-ons. That came in at $24,933, which actually came up $1,500 more. I did not include that information. I apologize. I should have shown that. Anyways, so the base price, the Kohler was the number 2. When we put the add-ons, the Kohler is the cheapest, or I should say the cheapest, most cost-effective. And that's the one that I'm looking to recommend, or looking for approval tonight.
Okay, any questions? Motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Keelan, second by Chestnut, that we approve purchasing the QT Pod Model M4000 self-service fueling terminal. Oh, am I on the wrong one? Oh, down. We already did that. All right. Backup generator to Total Energy Systems LLC for an amount not to exceed $23,415, and the funding will come through the sewer fund. Discussion. Sandy will call the roll.
Paul Hagan,
Aye.
Dave Peterson.
Aye.
Lori Chestnut,
Aye.
Mary Fair,
Aye.
Dimitri Martin,
Aye.
Alan Keeland,
Aye.
Paul Mayo,
Aye.
and Steve Hackett.
Aye.
8 ayes, motion carried.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the license report 1430 or 1493. This is for operators or bartenders license. There are 5 names on there, and we'd be looking for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Motion by Chestnut, second by Hackett, that we approve of license report number 1493. It's an operator's license pending background check and payment of money owed to the city. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against? Motion carried. I have nothing extra to add tonight, so we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Hagan,
Second.
second by Keelan. that we adjourn until our next regular council meeting, which is Tuesday, March 17th, 2020, subject to call. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. We are adjourned at 7:04 PM. Thanks, everybody, for attending and watching.